Hi everyone and welcome back to ThursDev. My name is Luke and this week we're talking about one of the greatest pitfalls in game development, arguably one of the factors that leads to the failure of many well-intentioned game development projects and one which has turned arguably strong game ideas into amorphous messes. Today, as a continuation of last week's video about game design pillars, I'd like to talk a little bit about feature creep. This video doesn't really necessitate that you watch through the episode preceding it, but if you aren't already familiar with game design pillars as a concept, I'd suggest watching through so that you understand some of the references I'll make to in this video. So without further ado, feature creep. If you haven't worked in the software development industry before, this very possibly could be an unfamiliar term, so let's start by defining feature creep so that everyone's on the same page. Feature creep is a term to describe the trend in some projects toward adding mechanics to a game or other piece of software that increases its scope beyond what it was originally intended without a need to do so. In small doses, the addition of features to a game is not always a bad thing. In many cases, additional features or a rework of existing mechanics are necessary to facilitate the creation of depth in a game, but it has a tendency toward the destructive when ambition turns a project from something simple into an unmanageable monster. There's definitely a time and place for expanding upon a game's concept and scope. Without doing so, we'd never have grown as an industry, but I'm advocating today for moderation. When we as developers overreach, we can, and most often do, fail miserably. So now that I've covered that particular subject, let's start by exploring how this happens. One of the key contributing factors in my experience to the problem of feature creep in game development is a lack of finite definition in a project. All too often a game project will be started and go into production, beginning the prototyping process almost immediately. The developer will have some idea of what they want the game to be like, and that's enough for them to get started with the basics. Prototyping leads to a handful of interconnected features, and perhaps our imaginary developer here is familiar with project management methodology like Agile Scrum, so they're defining user stories and scrumming and iterating and getting a lot accomplished. After some time, they've got a basic working prototype of a game and things are looking good, but the game doesn't quite feel done, so they begin to consider what the game needs in order to be finished, and they add another feature, which in turn adds to the game but still isn't quite enough to finish the game off, so they have to add more, and continue adding until eventually the game has gone from feature-rich to feature-bloated. The reason this happens with such alarming frequency usually stems from a lack of defined pillars prior to the production of the game, or in the presence of existing pillars, a studio ignoring their pillars because they like an idea and they just can't let it go. I talked about design pillars at length in last week's video, so I won't go into detail, but allow me to be a spoilsport one more time and implore any developers willing to lend an ear to define and restrict themselves to their pillars at a project's start. Unfortunately, for many working in the industry and who are involved in the creation of games, some of the most popular game design methods have a tendency to fly directly in the face of this philosophy, particularly Scrum, the project management methodology of choice in the games industry that puts a strong emphasis on evolving products. To quote directly, Scrum teams make frequent plans. For starters, they plan the current sprint. In addition, many teams create longer-term plans, such as release plans and product roadmaps. These plans help the team and the business make decisions. However, the team's goal is not to blindly follow the plan. The goal is to create value and embrace change. In essence, the thought process and ideas necessary for planning are more important than the plan itself. A plan created early is based on less information than will be available in the future, so naturally it may not be the best plan. As new information is discovered, the team updates the product backlog. That means the direction of the product likely shifts. This continuous planning improves the team's chances of success as it incorporates new knowledge into the experience. Scrum teams constantly respond to change so that the best possible outcome can be achieved. Scrum can be described as a framework of feedback loops, allowing the team to constantly inspect and adapt so the product delivers maximum value. I'm not challenging the value of Scrum in the least. This isn't a call to revolution. Scrum's basic tenets are very solid and do lead to great products, as those who use it correctly are always evaluating and reworking any one segment of a project that isn't fun or doesn't work in practice. but many development studios read the Scrum values or Agile manifesto and take it as writ that the goal is to create value and embrace change means don't limit yourself at all and make your game organically. It's this, what I believe to be misinterpretation of the methodology, that contributes to friction against establishing solid game design pillars and sticking to them. On a micro level, in designing and building the individual mechanics that make up the meat of a game project, this is a very worthwhile exercise. As a designer, we should both expect and welcome scrutiny of our designs and be ready to rework or even scrap them at a moment's notice. But on more than one occasion, I've seen people espousing the idea that designing is an exercise in, quote, finding the fun only, and letting planning and forecasting get in the way is taboo. Let's deconstruct the act of finding the fun, though, which is arguably the whole point of Scrum and game development. The Scrum methodology tells us that we should create a design plan based around user stories. As a player, I want to do X, then building around that simplified concept. With X in mind, the team works for a week or two, and then when X has been prototyped, they view X as a discrete mechanic, decide if it's good enough or not, and rinse and repeat. In a controlled environment, this is a very elegant way to ensure that each mechanic is fine-tuned and fun to play. But the tendency for the mechanic to evolve due to testing and retesting can easily lead to the mechanic taking on a life of its own, to mutate and grow in the search for its perfect tuning. In the process of searching for that elusive spark of fun in a game through what equates to exploratory game design surgery, a developer can very easily become mired in the minutiae of a game. Looking entirely on the micro level of a project leads only to the micro of a game being prioritized, and that can mean imbalance or lack of cohesion, or worse, a lopsided focus on a mechanic detracting from the game's depth overall. I would venture to say that nobody responsible for causing feature creep goes into the process with the intent to make a game needlessly complicated or to increase scope, change the game, or make anybody's life more difficult. The road to development hell is most certainly paved with good intentions, but those good intentions will eat productivity, increase time, dissolve cohesion in a game's vision, and 9 times out of 10 make your game worse. The big question to ponder, though, is where does expansion and improvement tip over into feature creep? You want a product to be the best that it possibly can be, and perhaps you have the time and money to make that idealized project a reality. The crafting, base building, or item collection mechanics that you're thinking of adding may even actually make the game better overall, but they have to have a reason to be there. A game's mechanics should be symbiotic with one another, feeding one another. At no point should one interfere unduly with another, unless its purpose is to give the player a break from the one that it blocks. Everything should be calculated, and though finding the fun is certainly important, the fun shouldn't be at the expense of the rest of the game unless the discovery of that fun leads to the dissolution of those mechanics it trumps, or a complete reassessment of the scope of the project, giving the new mechanic context. Take Fallout 4, a game with a ridiculous amount of features that still manages to maintain cohesion. You have a massive world wherein you customize a character, you explore, you scavenge for and manage inventory, you fight, you build a base, craft weapons and armor, build relationships with NPCs, go on quests, and participate in a branching personal narrative. That's an awful lot happening all at once, yet each one of the above all coalesce into a few simple pillars: exploration and discovery, combat, and personalization. The base building, a new mechanic introduced in the 4th game, mods notwithstanding, is one of the most overt expansions of scope on the Fallout model. It seems like it would be out of place, but a little thought shows that it's as much a form of personalization as creating your character's face at the beginning of the game. It's tied to the combat. It provides a new venue for scavenging and generating resources to be used in other crafting, and even ties in with the narrative as well, and that's why they work. There's nothing added that doesn't feed another part of the game. It's symbiotic, and therefore, it's not creep. It also has the benefit of a massive, expansive base to build upon, a number of already sprawling previous titles to which it's an iteration. But attempt to add that same base building to another, more compact but mechanically similar title like Deus Ex: Human Revolution. It has similar mechanics of exploration, combat, and even character personalization to a certain extent. There's scavenging, and you could even argue that the narrative rings on many of the same tones, but Deus Ex is a game of small, self-contained hubs of activity with well-defined borders. Adam Jensen's narrative requires him to have a sense of urgency that propels him forward to his final confrontation, where Fallout's is a slow trickle designed to accommodate excursions into the wild unknown, where the protagonist discovers the many oddities of the wasteland as an outsider. In order for base building to fit, you need to broaden the narrative, expand the scavenging, expand the game world to give Adam a reason that he should be expanding the Seraph building or whatever it is that he would have been doing. It wouldn't have been the same game. Deus Ex undoubtedly had a pillar that focused on forward momentum of the narrative. Everything should be pushing him toward the end of the game, that gigantic confrontation. That would have had to have been scrapped, and then it wouldn't have been Deus Ex. Expansion and improvement are additive, but unintrusive. Feature creep is destructive, or at least brings with it far too much baggage to maintain the scope of the project. Would it lead to a good game? Perhaps, in the long run, but it would certainly lead to the project you thought you were created becoming an entirely different beast, and usually in need of either far too much deconstruction or far too much addition to remain a viable product. And that's my talk for today. To sum it all up in short, when in doubt, consult your pillars, keep it simple, and be wary of adding more than you need to. Thank you for watching. I'm always thrilled to have people drop by to enjoy these videos. I hope that you enjoyed today's talk on feature creep, and that perhaps I've got you thinking next time you want to consider whether what you're adding to your game is something that should be there or not. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, hit that big red subscribe button down below and you'll get a notification every time I upload a new video, which is every day. Informative videos like this one twice a week on Thursdays and Sundays, and Let's Plays of awesome games both old and new the rest of the week. I really hope to see you again very soon, but until then, take care.